Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the final episode of the Every Item in Deadlock Explained Thoroughly. And today we are doing the Spirit items. The Spirit items buff most of the spells in the game, makes you do more damage, makes some abilities last longer, makes them stun longer. There's a lot to dig into here, so we're just going to start at the top. First, with 500 souls, we have Ammo Scavenger. This is a pretty interesting item, and I know I say that way too much, but Ammo Scavenger is an item that increases your ammo per soul you last hit, and it's a buff that lasts for a whopping 35 seconds. Because this one can have a maximum of 12 stacks, you can actually permanently run around with 24 extra spirit power during the laning stage. And as long as you keep last hitting within 35 seconds, you're also gonna keep having that spirit power buff. One hero that always buys this item, I'm pretty sure, is Haze. Haze has a pretty low ammo count in the beginning, but because her clip size scales with spirits, see there's a purple star next to her ammo, it means that this item kind of helps you a lot. It gives 15% ammo by default. It gives you some extra ammo when you last hit. And then because you have a permanent spirit power stack from all the last hits, you also have a temporary, technically, ammo increase from the spirit power. So this is a very good item for heroes that are not necessarily trying to focus on getting these big spirit items, because if you're going a very spirit heavy build, then you probably don't have space for this item, as it does not upgrade or build into anything, and its strength kind of lies in the laning stage and will usually be sold pretty quickly afterwards. Next up, we have Extra Charge. This item is great for heroes that have abilities that can have charges. You have Kelvin's Frost Grenade, you have Great Talon's Arrow, you have Lash's Grapple. All these abilities will gain an extra charge as well as some increased cooldown reduction. It is pretty much mandatory for most heroes that have abilities with extra charges. Same with Vindicta's ult. Next up is Extra Spirit. This item is very good for the laning stage because it gives you a little bit of everything you want. Some spirit power, health regen, and health. And also, it doesn't take up a slot, because later on you can upgrade it twice. You can upgrade it to Improved Spirit and later on to Boundless Spirit. So this is an item that can stay with you from the very beginning in the laning stage and all the way throughout the game. Really good item that is picked up on a lot of heroes. I buy this a lot. Next up, we have Mystic Burst. This item is essentially for anyone who has an ability that is guaranteed to do more than 80 damage in a single hit. There are some pretty cool uses for this. It's very common on Lash, Bebop, bombs and stuff. Another thing that is really cool about this, that there are a few abilities in this game that have lifesteal based on how much damage that ability does. And because this Mystic Burst is added onto the ability that does the bonus damage, it essentially means that if you have a Lash and you cast Flog, if you haven't procced Mystic Burst in the last 6 seconds, and your Flog does enough damage, then you're also going to heal a lot more because the bonus damage is added to the actual ability instead of a separate number. So that's something to have in mind of. It also counts with Kelvin's Frost Grenade. You can get some crazy heals off by buying Burst. And it also upgrades later to Improved Burst, which is just a better version. So yeah, it's a very common item to buy on anyone who does burst spirit damage. Mystic Reach. This item increases your ability range and gives you a little bit of spirit resist. It's another item that quite a few heroes buy early, and you can keep for a long time simply because later on it upgrades to Improved Reach. Ability range in this game is pretty interesting because it buffs pretty much everything, including your items. Even if you buy, for instance, Curse, and it has a cast range of 20 meters. If you get Mystic Reach, it's going to increase that range. So all the items that increase cooldowns and range and stuff also affect items. That's something to have in mind of if you have a certain item that you feel like the range isn't big enough. If you play, for instance, Bomb Bebop, it increases the range of being able to apply the bombs onto them, so it's easier to put the bombs on. And it also increases the radius of the bomb itself. And if you're unsure if Mystic Reach actually affects your abilities, when you're in-game and you hover over the item, it's going to tell you in the tooltip which items and which abilities it will buff and how much the range will change. It boosts, oh, by the way, not only casting range, but also AoE. So any ability that hits an area of effect, the area of effect will also be increased with Mystic Reach. This works even for items like Health Nova too. All right, next up we have Spirit Strike. This is one of my favorite laning items now that I've become a Bebop spammer. This item is just really good. Not only does it have a whopping 100 Spirit Shield, a little bit of health regen, as well as extra melee damage, but whenever you perform a light or heavy melee attack against a hero, it deals extra spirit damage with attack and reduces the target spirit resist. Now, the cool thing about this is that it applies to the uppercut from Bebop as well. So this is a perfect item for magic builds, especially bomb, because you hook them in, you put the bomb on them, and then you uppercut them, and the uppercut will apply the spirit resist. So this is an item that it costs 500 souls, but I usually keep this item the entire game as long as we have enough flex slots for the other items. I almost don't ever sell this because it's going to keep scaling, because 12% of spirit resist reduction is always going to increase the damage by 12% of an enemy, regardless of if your bomb does 500 or 1000 damage. Infuser. This is one of the strongest items in the game compared to its price. It has a active that has a 35-second cooldown that gives you spirit power and spirit lifesteal, and this is the most cost-efficient way of getting spirit power. It also gives you some health and ammo, so this item is bought a lot by many heroes, and some heroes keep this item for a very long time. One of them is Infernus. So what you do is, because this item, the way it works here is that if you apply a dot, a damage over time to someone, and then you pop your infuser afterwards, that dot is going to do more damage, and it's also going to heal you. You don't have to use it before you apply the dot. Everything happens instantaneously. It's not like a snapshot. In some games, snapshotting is basically that if you apply a damage over time ability, the only thing that matters is the stats you had at the moment you applied the dot. But here, it continuously flows. What this means is that whenever you play Infernus and you're in the laning stage, you harass your enemies, and as soon as you've harassed an enemy enough to apply the dot and they start burning, you press your infuser. Now that burn is going to deal more damage. It's also going to heal you. And that's also why Infernus players usually always buy infuser plus soul shredder bullets, because it's essentially both doing the exact same thing. You apply burn on them and they will have a debuff on them that increases the lifesteal and spirit amp you get on them. So they just work super well together. Some Bebop builds also buy it. I don't personally, but that is just because I've ran out of spirit slots. But a lot of Bebop builds buy Infuser because before he gets his level 5 ult, he doesn't have any lifesteal on it. So Bebop is one of the most efficient heroes to farm tier 3 camps as soon as you hit 3000 souls. As soon as the creep camp spawns 7 minutes in, you can run into the jungle and kill the tier 3 camps with your ult. This is a lot easier if you pop an Infuser, because that's essentially going to double or maybe even triple your spirit power early on, and it clears those camps super easy. This is a good item. Buy this item. Bullet Resist Shredder, the first 1250 item. It's an item that is very common for anyone who does hybrid DPS. You have heroes like Seven and Wraith who have no trouble applying spirit damage but still do a lot of bullet damage. One thing that is pretty cool that you can do is that if you have some of these heroes, they buy farming items like Tesla Bullets. Tesla Bullets is mainly still bullet damage, but it has a proc that does spirit damage. Now, once that procs, it means it also will proc Bullet Resist Shredder and therefore also reduce their bullet resistance. And you're guaranteed to get at least one Tesla proc more often than those 8 seconds, so it's permanently going to be on your target. It also gives you some health and bullet resist, so this is just one of those items that kind of gives you a little bit of everything, and it's pretty good to buy as one of your first 1250 items. Duration Extender. This item is mostly for anyone who has an ability that they want to last longer. For instance, if you play Infernus and you apply a debuff to the enemy, that debuff is going to last for longer. If you play Kelvin and you want the ult to last longer or the beam last longer, this item does that. And not only that, but it also upgrades or later on to superior duration. So this is a pretty good item to buy early also because it just gives solid stats in the laning stage too. It gives you bonus health and health regen, so it just makes you tank up a little bit more and makes you spam your abilities more often. They last for longer, sorry. But speaking of spamming your abilities more often, you have cooldown reduction. Improved cooldown is something you can technically buy on anyone. Some have more uses of it than others. I always buy it on Lash as one of my first items, and Great Talon as well. There's a lot of builds that focus on lowering Great Talon's ult cooldown by as much as possible. And this is a very good item to start with that. It doesn't really give much more stats than health regen. So you have to be a little bit wary that if you don't have a lot of 500 items, if you start focusing on items like this one, you might be very squishy. So that's just something to have in mind. It's also huge on Pocket, because Pocket has a lot of abilities where he can dodge damage and get out of shit. And yeah, I think a lot of Pocket players buy superior cooldown. Mystic Vulnerability. This is another item that functions similar to Spirit Strike, where it lowers the target's spirit resistance by 12%, except this is just generic whenever you deal spirit damage. It also gives you a little bit of spirit resistance, so that's something to have in the back of your mind too. And later on, it can be upgraded to one of the most highest damaging items in the game, escalating exposure. I buy this on my bomb build for Bebop because what this means is that because my Spirit Strike does spirit damage, essentially by just casting Uppercut on a target, they now have minus 24% spirit resistance for a 1750 souls investment. So just these two items alone will increase your bomb damage by 24%. It's not exactly 24 because it depends on how much spirit armor they actually have, if it goes into minus or not. But as like a general rule of thumb, it's around 24%. Then we have Quicksilver Reload. So this is one of those spirit items that is usually bought on heroes that are not focusing on spirit that much. Because one thing that is interesting is that let's say you play a very weapon heavy build, then you have items like Active Reload that gives you and a reload speed increase and so on. But the problem with that is that you might not have enough weapon slots available because a lot of heroes want to buy Fleetfoot, and suddenly you have a lot of these like 1250 souls items and not enough flex slots. So Quicksilver Reload is kind of the item that can replace Active Reload in a lot of situations. Most damage carries usually have one of them, and essentially just makes you instantly reload when you imbue this to an ability. So an example is if you play Vindicta, then it's pretty common that you imbue your ultimate with Quicksilver Reload, and it's got a 12-second internal cooldown before you can do it again. So what happens then is that because Vindicta always wants to shoot her enemies down to 50% and then ult, because the target takes 50% more damage with her ult, that has like a perfect synergy with Quicksilver Reload, because that means that you shoot and you're almost emptying your mag, and then you try to finish them off with your ult. And now you're probably going to get your ammo back and you can instantly do that again. And because her ult has several charges, it means that you can do this again and again and again, as long as it doesn't happen more often than 12 seconds. Yeah, it's also, some people buy it on Infernus as well for his one ability. You can use it for that too. I personally don't think that's great because I think he should always use his one ability to initiate, because it amplifies how much damage he does and stuff. So I personally think it wouldn't be ideal to hold off on applying that debuff just because you're going to use it as a reload later on. And you wouldn't want to use it at the start because then you have 12 seconds before you can use it again. Next up is Suppressor. This is another one item similar to Bullet Resist Shredder. It's pretty good to buy early because it gives you a lot of good stats as well. It gives you health regen, spirit power, and it lowers the enemy's fire rate whenever you deal spirit damage. It also upgrades to one of the most annoying items in the game to face, which is Mystic Slow, and is pretty commonly bought on hybrid DPSers. There are some pretty nasty builds you can do where you can buy both Suppressor, that later gets into Mystic Slow, plus slowing bullets, and then you have Tesla bullets to make sure that you're also proccing both Bullet Resist Shredder and Suppressor. So yeah, good item overall, and it helps you a lot in duels. So when you're like 1v1 in something, the fire rate is super important, because lower fire rate also means that the potential for life stealing is lower, and so forth. Yeah. Next up, we have Cold Front. Cold Front is similar to Shiva's Guard from Dota, for those of you who played that game. It releases a Ice Blast around you, deals spirit damage, and slows the target. This is pretty much a core item on heroes like Yamato and Lash, because you have very strong gap closing abilities. And then once you've used your gap closing abilities, you want to make sure that the enemy doesn't get away. And one efficient way of doing that is to get Cold Front to slow them down. And what a lot of Lash players do is actually to pop their Cold Front slightly before you do your ground stomp. And the reason for that is because it has a slight delay, like it lasts for a little bit longer than just instantly, which means that it increases the amount of instant burst AoE damage you do when you land. Let's say you ult someone with Lash, you throw them down, and then you ground slam, and then you do Cold Front after. Well, now you've given them a small window where they can use warp stones and stuff and dashes and whatnot to dodge the increased burst damage. So by casting Cold Front slightly before your ground stomp, you're essentially just increasing your one-shot potential by whatever damage your Cold Front is currently doing, because it scales with spirit power as well. Next up, we have Decay. This is an extremely strong item You want to buy this a lot against strong healing comps and tanks, because not only does it reduce their healing for 10 seconds, it also makes them bleed 3% health, 3.1% health every second. I did notice recently, because I talked about this item briefly in another video, that it is their current health. I thought it was their max health. So that of course means that the power level is slightly lower than I thought, but this is still a really good item to keep throughout the game and combined with Heal Bane and Toxic Bullets. So this one and this one, you can pretty much negate 90 to 95% of all the healing a hero can do for 10 seconds. So super good against Abrams, Infernus, anyone who buys Leech, especially if you see someone rushing a Leech before they get a lot of defensive items, pick up this item and start using it. Then we have Slowing Hex. Slowing Hex is an item that passively increases your sprint speed a bit, so it's better for roaming, a little bit of spirit power. It deals spirit damage and slows targets' movements and dashes. It also silences their movement-based items and abilities. So what this essentially means is that if you're hit by Slowing Hex, you can no longer use items and abilities to get out of stuff. You can still use your stamina stuff, you can still roll and dash. So one hero that always wants to buy Slowing Hex is a Warden. Warden has an ability called Binding Word. Curse an enemy hero. If they don't move away from their initial position within the escape time, they'll be damaged and immobilized. So what is pretty common is to combine Slowing Hex with Binding Word to almost guarantee that you will get the root off. It's a very strong combo. You can buy it very early on and it's very annoying to deal with. And when you're laning against a Lash, you always got to make sure that you have some stamina left in the tank or you're going to be screwed. So this item is very good to buy when you're laning against Warden. Then you have Withering Whip. This item isn't bought by that many heroes, but it's pretty interesting because it also increases your fire rate and has an active that applies fire rate slow and reduces our bullet resist. Haze buys this a lot. I feel like every single time I see a Haze, I see this item. This item will help you in a 1 versus 1, especially if you're facing another weapon damage heavy carry, then this is going to greatly increase your chance at winning a 1v1. Okay, now we get to the juicy 3000 items. So the 3000 souls items on Spirit Power are core on so many builds. These items are bought very often. We start with Improved Burst, which is an upgrade from Mystic Burst. Now, instead of just doing a small amount of magic damage when you reach a damage threshold, now the damage threshold is increased to 125, but the enemy takes 10% of their max health in bonus damage. It also gives you 100 Spirit Shield health. So what this means is that this item will scale throughout the game. My personal experience and opinion is that you don't need to buy this item too early, because early on people don't have that high health pools, especially if you're playing against Abrams and Mo and Krill, all these like tanky dudes with really high HP. Then the damage from Improved Burst is gonna increase drastically. This is a must buy on Lash, it's a must buy on Great Talon, Bomb Bebop, a lot of builds, but I definitely think you don't have to rush this, because if people have 1,000 health, then this one, you're investing 3,500 souls in doing 100 extra damage. But yeah, a really good item nonetheless. It's very strong on Great Talon's ult. The interesting thing about Great Talon's ult is that when it's upgraded to max level, enemies that are below 22% health are killed instantly. And that applies after the damage that is done by the ability plus the Improved Burst. So that is why this item is a must buy on Great Talon, especially for ult buy builds, because you're just increasing the chance of getting a one-hit kill with the Owl. And because Great Talon gets permanent spirit power scaling per kill, it's really essential to get those ult kills to get you scaling. Next up, we have Improved Reach. Again, this is another one that is just basically better than this one in any way, just a direct upgrade. Not much else to say, other than that this item, you imbue it to one of your abilities to do have an even bigger range. It still gives 25% range to all your other abilities as well as your items, but you can imbue one specific ability to give it an extra 10%. It's really good on Mo and Krill because his ult has extremely short range. And he also has actually 3. Actually, it's going to increase the radius of all of his abilities, no? Next up, we have Improved Spirit. Again, this is the upgrade from Extra Spirit, and later on it becomes Boundless Spirit. This is pretty standard, just a solid upgrade to your total spirit power. Makes your ability scale more. It also adds some health regen, sprint speed, and bonus health. And this is just a really good item. One thing to have in mind is that there are a few heroes that have some sort of direct scaling with spirit power, and they will always have more benefits out of buying items like this over items like this, because this item doesn't give you any spirit power in itself except the 12 spirit you get from being a 3000 souls item. So for instance, a Grey Talon gets more movement speed, so does 7. Warden gets more fire rate. So yeah, that's just something to bear in mind, that some builds are more beneficial to get pure spirit power on. And then next up we have Mystic Slow. This is an item that is extremely annoying to deal with. It's really hard to fight anyone who's using Mystic Slow. They will lower your movement speed and your fire rate. And like I mentioned earlier, if they combine it with other similar slowing effects like slowing bullets, plus having Tesla bullets to apply the spirit damage, this is suddenly becoming really annoying. You can also buy this on Shiv if you really hate your enemies. So there are some Shiv builds with Mystic Slow plus escalating exposure, and they are just slowed until they can barely move, and their spirit resistance is just going downwards. Next up we have Rapid Recharge. This item recently got nerfed, or at least like readjusted power level wise. It used to give 3 bonus ability charges. Now that was a little bit strong, especially for Lash Vindicta and Grey Talon. Now it gives 2 instead, but also increases the cooldown time. Still a very good item, and I think still mandatory in most cases on heroes that use abilities that give multiple charges. But yeah, nonetheless, it was slightly adjusted. Superior cooldown. Superior cooldown is one of the most fun items to have in a game, just because it's so fun to use abilities. There are some Bebop builds that put superior cooldown on your hook. Grey Talon, I use it in my Lash build as well. It's just, I don't know, this is just a fun item. I personally am a huge enjoyer of cooldown and movement speed. To be able to move faster around the map and also use your spells more often just makes the game feel a lot more fun and smooth. So to me, this is a must buy on many heroes. And just like with Improved Reach, you can also imbue one ability to get even more cooldown reduction. Then we have Superior Duration. Again, this is an upgrade. And this is like back to what's very interesting about itemization and spirit items, is that you're noticing that both these items are just direct upgrades from 1250 items. So that makes the natural pacing and scaling of your build a lot easier, because in the early to mid stage, you can buy both of these and you don't have to like save up tons of souls, and you can just keep them around. And same with Mystic Reach and Mystic Burst. And then all these 4 items, 5 actually with Extra Spirit, all these 5 items actually upgrade to other spirit items later on, and you can then prioritize which ones you want to upgrade first depending on what the thought process behind your build is. You can still keep the base versions of all the other ones, so because they still give you a lot of stats, especially because you have to remember the extra spirit power you simply get just for having an item. So you should always have your item slots more or less filled out. There's no point in not having 2 to 3 items of every category here. Like I buy 6 to 8 500 cost items on almost every hero. 6 to 8. Next, I have Surge of Power. Surge of Power, in my opinion, is a very underestimated item that should be bought more. Not only is it one of the most efficient ways of gaining permanent spirit power on a certain ability, but it also gives you 3 meters per second movement speed, and it lasts for 6 seconds. And because the cooldown on this is only 10 seconds, this means that you have a pretty high uptime on getting increased movement speed. I recently added this to my Bomb Bebop build because I realized that the cooldown is identical to the bomb. And one thing that I've noticed is that when you're applying the bomb and then you're planning on doing an Echo Shard and then planting another bomb again, then in some cases, if they slightly escape the range you have to apply the bomb, then this is going to help you consistently being able to apply 2 bombs. Because you press your bomb, now you have 3 movement speed extra for 6 seconds. You press your Echo Shard, and if they got slightly out of range, now you're much more likely to catch up with them and put the second bomb on as well, because you have extra movement speed. And not only that, but because it has the highest spirit per souls efficiency. It also will make your bombs do more damage compared to other items of similar cost. And I've been thinking about adding this item in a lot of my builds for a long time, but I think I'm kind of sleeping on the item and kind of forgetting that it exists. And now it's definitely a core item in my Bomb Bebop build, and I'll probably add this to a lot of other heroes too. Next up, you have Torment Pulse. Torment Pulse is an extremely strong item. It gives bonus health and spirit power, but the big thing here is that every 1.5 seconds, it deals spirit damage to the closest two enemies nearby. And this pulse is a 9-meter radius. It makes your jungling an absolute speed fest. You fly through the jungle. This is great on tanks like Abrams and Mo and Krill. And because you can also reduce the cooldown. Yeah, like you can also reduce the cooldown of this item with cooldown reduction stuff. So if you have superior cooldown, it's going to be probably like 1.2 or something. So Torment Pulse is, I think, an item that a lot of people are forgetting exists. But if you play a hero that is planning to stay a lot in melee range of enemy heroes, then this is going to do a lot of damage. And you have to think about it this way too. Because this one periodically deals spirit damage every 1.5 seconds, if you use this one with like something like escalating exposure, you're also continuously applying a stacking debuff that makes your damage stronger and stronger and stronger against them. So whenever you see items like this, try to also imagine, okay, what kind of combos can I put that in? Like, what kind of benefits would I get from periodically dealing spirit damage to the closest two enemies nearby? Because that could help you make your build and put your build in a different direction. For instance, what if you put Mystic Slow in there? Okay, now suddenly, whenever you're nearby someone, you will permanently slow anyone who's nearby you, even if you're not hitting them, just because a Torment Pulse is hitting them. So if you have gap closing like Yamato and Abrams and Mo and Krill, then this item is extremely strong. Then we have Ethereal Shift. This is an item that I wish wasn't in the game. I'm just joking. This item is really strong because you can literally dodge any ability with it. It requires quite a lot of skill because you need to use sound cues and kind of read the environment to know when to use it. But for instance, you can dodge the damage from Bebop's bombs. You can dodge Wraith ult with it, or any castable spell that has some sort of duration before it hits you. You can activate it to react. So for instance, when Wraith ult, there's a projectile that follows you, and once that projectile hits you, you get stunned. And that projectile makes a very loud sound. So once you hear the sound of that projectile chasing you, you can actually activate Ethereal Shift, and now when the projectile reaches you, it does nothing. And it also gives you some spirit power. It can dodge Dynamo ult, but it has to be cast before. So that means that if you see that he's about to ult you, if you read, it's like a read, then you can pop it first. That's called a prediction cast. But you cannot reactively do it after he ulted because you're unable to cast in his ult. Do you guys want to know something cool? This is pretty nerdy. But so I have a music degree, and I noticed that Ethereal Shift has a certain melody.
If you like that, I got some other stuff that fell off the truck.
I learned the rhythm of the melody to predict exactly when Ethereal Shift ends. Now, of course, this changes if they have any sort of duration extender, but by default, it is 3.5 seconds. So when you listen to the melody, boom, ba, 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 gone. So what this tells me is that if someone nearby me uses Ethereal Shift and I know that they have no duration extender whatsoever, I can predict exactly when the Ethereal Shift ends. And the reason why this is important is because some heroes like Lash, for instance, he wants to jump up and ground strike right as the Ethereal Shift ends. So now what you can do is you hear the Ethereal Shift. Okay, now you just get up somewhere or you double jump and you just try to time it exactly when that melody ends. However, it's important to remember though, you can cancel Ethereal Shift early. But that's not extremely common because Ethereal Shift is normally a oh shit button. But nonetheless, that is something to have in mind, that this item can be cancelled. Next up, we have Knockdown. Knockdown is another item that I think more people should buy. Well, that goes for almost all the active items, but Knockdown recently, in my opinion, got buffed. It used to take 3 seconds before it's stunned, and it was stunned for around 1.3 seconds. Now they lowered the stun to 0.9, but they also lowered the time it takes before the stun hits from 3 to 2 seconds. And the reason why I think that's a buff is because this item is mostly used to knock 7 out of his ult, to knock a Great Talon and Vindicta out of the sky. It has a 45 meter cast range. Whenever you see a 7 play ult build, you should buy Knockdown. In general, crowd control is great in this game. It's also great on Bebop because a 1 second stun means that you're guaranteed to hit your hook. So if you apply Knockdown on someone, you follow them and you know after 2 seconds, they're going to be in the same spot for a single second. And that is the perfect time to hook them. And also, do not sleep on the fact that it gives you 1 stamina extra and 200 spirit shield health and 6 spirit power. Those are still really good stats. Like an extra stamina can help you so much. So this item is great for hunting down targets and countering channeling abilities. So yeah, definitely buy this against 7. You can even buy this if you're struggling with a Bebop ult too, because Bebop ult can be extremely strong, but he can be stunned out of it. This is a pretty fun item. And then finally we have Silence Glyph. Notice how these items are both giving 200 spirit shield health. That's quite a lot. Silence Glyph is extremely strong. It makes you unable to cast any of your abilities for 3 seconds, but it also deals damage and it scales with spirit power. So late game, the Silence Glyph can do 300 damage or more. It's very strong on heroes like Pocket, where you want to get in, you want to do all your shit, and then get out 3 seconds later. And in those 3 seconds, your enemy essentially cannot do much. It's also good on if you play... I'm sorry that I keep mentioning Bebop, man, but I'm such a Bebop enjoyer. I can't stop. It's also good for him because like you hook someone in and you uppercut them, you put some bombs on them, and then you silence them at the same time, then they can't use their abilities to counter it because Dynamo can stop your bombs, Ivy can stop your bombs, Pocket can stop your bombs. There's a lot of stuff it stops. But there's one thing you have to know, and that is that it does not silence items. So what this means is that you can still use all your items while you're silenced, and that means you can also use debuff remover to remove the silence as a whole. Next up, we have the luxury item slots, the 6,300 souls. Now, the most expensive item in the game is Boundless Spirit. I previously said in a video that it was Silencer. That was wrong, and I apologize. Boundless Spirit recently got buffed to add 25% weapon damage, so it's now even better for hybrids. This affects heroes like 7 and Great Talon a lot. This is the highest amount of spirit power you can get from one item. It also gives a whopping 15 health regen. It's extremely expensive, but the cool thing is because you can buy the components earlier on, it doesn't have to be that hefty of an investment. This is a super good item that any hero that is like gonna do a lot of spirit damage eventually wants to buy this. Then you have Diviner's Kevlar. This is one of my favorite items. I buy it on Lash. You can buy it on a lot of heroes. A lot of people buy it on Pocket too. Pocket has a lot of shield builds in general, so kind of perfectly syncs up with that. Not only does it give 20% spirit lifesteal and cooldown reduction, but every time you cast your ultimate, you gain a temporary bullet shield, spirit shield, and spirit power. And it lasts for 15 seconds. The cool thing is that if you have an ultimate that has a pretty similar cooldown to Diviner's Kevlar, that's how it's going to be the most efficient. So for instance, when you have Diviner's Kevlar and superior cooldown on Lash, both Diviner's Kevlar and his ult will be around 40 seconds cooldown because the item also reduces the cooldown of other items. So now you can ult every 40 seconds and you'll get increased shields and spirit power every time you ult. So yeah, really strong item, really fun item to use too because you can really change a fight. I've had some times where I get ulted by a haze, I'm 1 HP and I pop my Diviner's Kevlar and suddenly the ult does no damage to me and it basically stuns him out of his ult and turns around the fight. Next up, you have Escalating Exposure. This item is an item that can really catch you off guard if you're not noticing the fact that someone's using it. There are some Shiv builds, for instance, that use this. So the whole idea behind this item is that you will slowly wear down your opponent's spirit resistance. And then when you've amped up the spirit amp a lot, then you attack them. So for instance, what Shiv does, because he has a dagger he can spam on you that does damage over time. And this debuff lasts for 15 seconds. What he does, he will throw his dagger at you, then he will wait a little bit. He throws another one, wait a little bit. This ability will do more damage if it stacks. So that means that if you manage to reapply it before the previous one ran out, it will do more and more damage every time. But regardless of whether or not you manage to apply a new stack and increase the amount of damage they take, escalating exposure will keep ticking because it's a debuff that lasts for 15 seconds. So without you knowing it, sometimes a Shiv can have like added 50, 60, 7% spirit amp on you while your health is almost full. So you are not even aware of the fact that he's kind of just like kind of preparing you for his meal, you know? Like he's kind of just like moisturizing you before he's going in. Oh God, that sounded so bad. Anyway, so be careful with this item. If someone has escalating exposure, yeah, seasoning you. That's what I meant. I think that sounds much better. What happens is it can stack up to 120-ish% damage to you with this item. So be very careful if he throws a few daggers at you and then just waits. And then after 10 seconds, he goes in and suddenly all his abilities will do double damage to you. It's also really good on Bebop ult builds because the beam continuously deals damage. So every 0.7 seconds, that beam is just going to keep ramping up the damage on you. And it's going to get tricky to stay in there. A Mystic Reverb. This is a really cool item. This is a very unique passive, so every 6 seconds, you can make one of your abilities apply a slow in a large area and have like a delayed explosion after 3 seconds. This is really good on Grey Talon. You can use it both on his ult or his arrow, depending on what your playstyle is. And it also slows down that entire radius. I also buy this on Lash because it's so fun to slam someone with the ground stomp. And then after the ground stomp lands, they are all slowed, and then they will all take an extra AoE after. It also gives really good buffs to all your abilities: Spirit Lifesteal, Ability Range, and Spirit Resist. So this is just a super good item overall, and it's a lot of fun to use. Definitely try to use this one, and try to figure out fun ways of using it, because there's a lot of funny combos that you don't necessarily think about first. For instance, I've seen some people use this on Shiv. They use this on Shiv's dagger, just because as soon as that dagger hits you, you are slowed down so much. If you have Mystic Reverb plus Mystic Slow plus the slow from the dagger itself, once he hits you with a single dagger, you can barely move. This is a very fun item to use. I also buy it on Bomb Bebop. You get a giant explosion, and when your bomb deals like 1200 damage, then there'd be another delayed explosion of another 600 after. I just want to see how...
Won't be around much longer.
Wow. Wow. Wait, that is actually so annoying. Dude, with Mystic Slow and Mystic Reverb?
Gently used.
Dude. Nah, that's not fair, bro. Nah, that's not fair. Okay, moving on. Curse. Curse is a extremely strong item. It is the only item that can completely shut down a star player on the enemy team. So if you have a game where one hero on the enemy team is super far ahead, like a super fed 7 or Haze or something, please buy Curse. Not only does it stop item usage, disarm silence, it also interrupts. You can use this to stop 7 ult. You can use this to stop Haze ult. You can use this to stop Bebop ult. You can use this to stop people from shooting on you. It's basically like an upgraded version of Silence Glyph. It obviously has a longer cooldown because it's so strong, but this is the ultimate item to shut someone down. What's the duration for Mr. Rubber? It lasts for 3 seconds with a 6-second cooldown, so 50% uptime. So yeah, definitely buy Cursed, guys, if you want to counter some heroes. Because I play a lot of bomb bebop, people sometimes buy Ethereal Shift to dodge the bombs. So what I do then, I buy Curse. So I hook them, I put double bomb uppercut, and I curse them after. Because the bomb explodes after 3 seconds and the curse duration is 3.25, it means that it's just enough for the bombs to go off before they can ethereal shift out of it. So next up is Echo Shard. This is actually currently my favorite item because this allows me to apply 2 bombs at 1 target. So this item resets the cooldown of your most recently used non-ultimate ability. It's also really good on if you play turret McGinnis, so you can place out an extra turret. It also gives you some bullet resist and movement speed and spirit power. Some buy it also on Viscous to be able to pop 2 goo squares after each other, but this is the key core item for double bomb bebop. I buy this every single game. I rush it after my 500 items to start build bomb stacks because Bebop gets 2.5% permanent damage increase every time he does damage to a hero with a bomb. So of course, the more bombs, the more stacks. Then you have Magic Carpet. This item, for a long time, I thought this item was just a meme. And then I started to see some pretty good players using it. First of all, the standard stuff, some ability duration, time, spirit power, bonus health. But it's the fact that while flying, you're immune to slows and doing any action will dismiss the carpet. So what this means is that if you are playing a split pusher, now you essentially have an Ivy ult to get out. One thing that is very common when you play Ivy is that you will split push a side lane, you push it really hard, and then as soon as someone comes to defend, you just fly out and you just do it again somewhere else. And usually they would have to need more than one person rotating to even be able to deal with you or kill you. Magic Carpet isn't necessarily that much of a meme. There are situations where you can buy it. I saw a Moen Krill. I think it was yesterday, me and Red were playing, and then there was this hilarious Moen Krill player in our lobby who just popped Magic Carpet and he just flies up to Vindicta and ults her. And I thought that was so fucking funny. So definitely can be a gap closer against Vindicta and Great Talon or heroes that like to stay in the background, and definitely has its use as a split pushing tool to also be able to get away safely. But in most cases, it's just a meme, but it's still a really cool item. All right, and then the final item is Refresher. This item refreshes the cooldown of all your abilities and restores all your charges. This is extremely strong for heroes that have very long ult cooldowns like Seven and Dynamo, and this item alone can completely turn a game. If a Dynamo gets 3 or 4 heroes in his ult and he has a Refresher, that's just, you can turn a 30k souls lead, 40k souls lead with just the press of a Refresher. A very strong item. It's also very common on Yamato because Yamato's ult is pretty cool. So what she does, her ult makes her unkillable for 5 seconds. 6.5 seconds when you upgrade it. So if you are in 1 HP, because it's very common for Yamatos to pop their ult when they're about to die, and then they won't die for another 6.5 seconds. And now what you do is you pop your Refresher right as your ult is about to end, so you can do it again. And now suddenly you have 13 seconds where you're unkillable. And the cool thing is, because there are some items that make you a lot stronger when you're below a certain HP. So for instance, if you play Yamato and you have Frenzy, while you're below 40% health, you gain 45% spirit rate, spirit resist, fire rate, movement speed. Now you combine this with something like Leech, for instance, you can essentially go from 1 HP and back up to full while being invincible for 13 seconds. So definitely a very strong item on Yamato, Dynamo, and Seven. I don't think it's that good on Talon because his Hawk is already like 30-second cooldown. So yeah, that was the final guide of the item shop. I know it was very comprehensive. I know it took a lot of time. I know these videos are super long. I saw some criticism that the videos get a little bit boring or a little bit too long. And I'm sorry about that, but I also think that it's really hard to make a TLDR, quick and easy item guide to this game because it is so complex, and I think it's important to talk about all the nuances, how different heroes interact with the items, and what to think about when you make the builds. So I do understand that for some people, that means that they won't be interested in watching the video because it's so long, but then I also think that that's not necessarily the audience I'm trying to reach. I think that anyone who wants to take a deep dive into items and learning more about these items in the game, they will take the time to watch those 50 minutes or whatever it is. And if you don't, then it's just not the video for you. Most of my videos are between 20 to 30 minutes, so these ones are obviously an exception. But I think nonetheless that it's really hard to just cut it down to 20, 30 minutes without leaving out some information that I personally find crucial for people to understand why they should buy an item in the first place. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this, and let me know in the comments down below what your favorite item is from the Spirit section, and I'll see you in the next video. And don't forget to subscribe if you are very, 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 very cool. Thank you.